Good morning. Welcome to church this morning. My name is Laurel. I'm the children's pastor here at MAC, and we're so excited that you're watching with us today. If you are a teacher or an educator of some sort, congratulations, you have made it. And kids and families, I hope you guys all have a really great summer. Last day of school is this week, so congrats, and congrats to the grads graduating tomorrow also. Just one quick announcement to bring to your attention today. If you are wanting to sign up to bring food to fill the pantry for G&M, who are returning shortly, you can head to the My Mac tab on the church website, click under the events, and you can sign up there to bring food for their pantry that can be dropped off at the church. Thanks, and let's sing together.
So much more that body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Oh, Jesus, yours is the victory. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Oh, God, you are my living hope.
Hi everyone, Richard and Marinda here on our new location, back in Canada now, but we're still in quarantine here in Calgary. We're going to be out in a few days, but so far all is well. We just want to thank you for praying. Our tests have all come back negative, and we just praise God, but we still have to wait till Monday when we get out.
Right. So if you think about us in this coming week, it's surely a different place to land than Ghana. And so we're just praying that we'll know how to be, good transition well into living in Canadian life. One of the things we're really, really excited about for next week is that we'll be able to see some of our international workers who are actually here in Calgary and Edmonton area. And although the restrictions have not been fully lifted, we are able to meet with people outside. And we are so thrilled because a number of them are going to be returning after their home assignments and other trips here to Canada to back to the desert sand. And so we have not been able to see them for a long time because travel has been limited. So this is a huge gift from the Lord. So pray for us as we meet with them in person. I think there are 4 family units that we'll probably be seeing next week, maybe even a 5th one, although she will be in quarantine. So also pray for one of our workers who is flying this weekend, and she will be here in quarantine for the next 2 weeks. She'll be arriving, on Monday, right? Yeah.
That's right.
So thank you so much for your prayers. We love you all, and we look forward to seeing you all later in the summer.
Hey Mac, before we get into this morning's message, I just want to draw your attention to our website. If you go to mordenalliance.ca, right on the main page, there is a new link that I'd encourage you to check out. As news continues to emerge from the horrific evils that have been committed at the different residential schools across our country, I'm sure it'll hit you with different levels of grief and sometimes being paralyzed with not knowing what your role is when faced with this kind of tragedy. Our denomination, the Christian Missionary Alliance, a few years ago, in conjunction with the Truth and Reconciliation Project, have actually put together a few resources that we want to make available to you. So I'd encourage you to go to our website. Right on the main page, there's a Truth and Reconciliation prayer guide that has a prayer guide for each one of the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There's also a short clip from our First Nations pastor, Howard Jolly, who gives us a few resources that you can be watching or pointing you in direction to maybe some books that you can read that would help educate you. And also a short sermon that Pastor Nathan Westlake from Prairie Alliance Church was asked to give on behalf of our denomination about a year ago on the topic of racism and reconciliation. So I'd encourage you to go and utilize those resources, become familiar with them, and put yourself in a posture of being able to lament and learn as we really wrestle with this blemish that's on our Canadian past and also on the church as well. That this is a time where maybe we don't need to come quick with answers, but be in a spot where we are quick to listen and slow to speak. All right, hey, welcome everyone. We are right smack dab in the middle of our James series, and we're welcome anyone who is joining us maybe for the first time. Don't feel like you have to go back and watch the other ones to join us today. I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to pick up exactly where we are and continue and get something really good out of today's text. So James is, just a bit of context, the half-brother of Jesus. He was an early leader in the Jerusalem church. He's writing this letter that we have that we call the Book of James. It's in our Bibles. He's writing this letter to Jewish believers who have been kind of scattered, and he wants to encourage them on how they live their faith, that there's an important element of living out your faith that for James is really crucial for having a faith that works, for having a faith that gets stuff done, a faith that is vibrant and alive. And this is something that I think we all want. We want to have this faith that works. And sometimes we could look at other people and their faith seems to work and ours doesn't. And so we want to give you the tools on how you can put into practice the things in your life to give you a vibrant faith that works, a faith that can stand up to all the trials that we encounter in our lives. So with that being said, we're going to be talking about wisdom today, and let's dive right into James's writing. We're picking up at James chapter 3, starting at verse 13, where he says this. He says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom." Kind of a strange thing, perhaps, if you're saying, hey, who's wise out there? It might actually be the disqualifying thing when you say, hey, if you're wise, put up your hand. And everyone who puts up their hand actually is revealing how unwise they are. Because the wise person is bit more self-aware. They know just how much they don't know. And so you might have someone who is just so eager to show how wise they are. I think you need to test that kind of stuff. And I think James wants to also give people in the church an option to be able to show that they are wise. Because wisdom is a gift, and the wisdom is supposed to be given to individuals so that they can help other people. And so as a church, we need wise people. We need wise people in leadership. We need wise people in different ministries and serving. And James says, you want to show that you're wise? Let's examine your life. And your life should reveal how wise you are. He doesn't come out and say, hey, who among you is really intelligent and knows lots of theology? Let's prove it by answering my questions. Now, he takes a different approach. He's like, who's wise? I'm not going to ask you questions. I want you to show me through your life and do it in a way that's humble. And I think that's maybe tipping his hand to where he's going with this, because humility really needs to be done in a spirit of, wisdom needs to be lived out in a spirit of humility, because if it has pride and arrogance there, well, I think that disqualifies you from being wise. So James wants to give permission to people to be able to look and evaluate your own life and in front of others in the church. Are you wise? Are you living it out? He says, but if you harbor any bitter envy or selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast about it or deny the truth. And this might be a spot where we begin to conflate what wisdom looks like. That we have this drive in us, which is a good thing. An ambitious drive is good. Bitter envy, maybe not so much, but the word envy here could also be translated as zeal. And now zeal is something that as a society we tend to reward those who are zealous, and they have a zeal for getting things done, and they have an ambition for getting things done. James is warning, saying wisdom that has that zeal and has that selfish ambition also is not the right kind of wisdom to build your life on. And maybe this is just my own life and a reflection of my own insecurities, or the algorithms of social media being able to pinpoint my own weak spots. But I see things in my social media all the time of like people talking about how important it is for you to have like a side hustle and to be like busting your butt working as hard as you can. That 60-hour, 80-hour work week, that's what's going to make you successful. See this guy, he's 25 and he's already a millionaire, and shame on you for not investing since you've been 4, or whatever it might be. And it's just giving you this impression that the only way that you can have value or knowledge or wisdom is by just elevating yourself and focusing so much on your ambitions to achieve and to accomplish things. And James is talking about it, saying wisdom, if you have wisdom, that's good, but if it's full of this zealousness or selfish ambition, that's also not good. Don't lie that you don't have those things, because it's going to be destructive to you. And this zeal, if we're talking about zeal instead of envy, this would have been common in, like Jesus' first disciples. We have Simon, who's one of his disciples, and he's called Simon the Zealot. He is a Jewish zealot. But the Jewish zealots didn't go away. In fact, all religions have zealots. You have Christians who have zealots, Muslims have zealots, atheist zealots, QAnon zealots. You just kind of choose whatever religion, Buddhists, or even focus groups, or hobbyists or whatever. There's zealots that are there, and zealots really can be classified as having an uncompromising view on the world, and they are willing to have the ends justify the means. And so a zealot can steamroll you. They don't really care about who you are. They care about making sure that their belief that they're convinced is 100% right, that is preserved no matter what. And so there's always a lot of collateral damage among people who are zealous for things. So in our culture, if we're looking to try and find who is wise, James is giving us information to be like, careful about those who are ambitious, selfishly, and who have this bitter envy or this zeal to them, because that isn't a good thing. James goes so far in the next verse, he says, such wisdom, and he gives it this air quote, such wisdom is, get that slide up there, such wisdom does not come from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Demonic? Really? That seems like, okay, come on, James, you're kind of being hard on us a little bit here. I mean, we can probably take some, worldly knowledge and use that. Like all truth is God's truth, isn't it? Well, yeah, except James isn't talking about truth here. He's not talking about knowledge. He's talking about wisdom. And there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. I think this is one of those things that is played out in the classic illustration of knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. It's about being able to take knowledge and then be able to know how to apply it. And so there's lots of worldly knowledge that is not in itself wrong or evil or bad. There's like truth that's there, and yeah, all truth is God's truth. But how do we handle it? How do we let it shape us? How do we let it inform our lives and our decisions? Because that's where things can become worldly and unspiritual and demonic, and where we need to shift it there. James says, wherever you have this envy and self-ambition, there you're going to find disorder and every evil practice. And I think this is only reveals itself to be true in our own lives. Whenever we are in a spot where, or whenever I'm in a spot where I am overly selfishly ambitious or have bitter envy or zeal in my life, then it's amazing the kind of things that I can concoct to get away with what I want. Because I am inherently a selfish being, and I need to continue to die to that self. And the difference is that we're probably just better at hiding a lot of our own sin. We're like, well, is my ambition really that demonic? Well, it might be maybe if you have like white collar or like blue collar crime. Perhaps when we think of that demonic and that vile type of offense, we might be thinking of that blue collar crime where you're getting your hands dirty, where you're actually murdering someone, or you're kidnapping them, you're doing an armed robbery. Like, you are the person who get your hands just so dirty. But white collar crime is more of that stuff that appears way softer, and no one's really getting as much hurt. And so we have embezzlement and fraud and tax violations and loopholes. Those can't hurt anyone. Well, just because you're keeping your hands clean doesn't mean that you're keeping your soul clean. The sin that's there is still going to stain you, and it's still going to cause pain and harm. You've just been able to maneuver yourself so that you are a few steps removed from the real dirty work. So we just have to be really aware of this, that when selfish ambition and envy are driving us, it's going to lead to a life where it's going to be all sorts of evils that take place, and including getting our hands dirty, and not just this white collar stuff. Even the white collar stuff, it's not good. So we need to stay away from it. Luckily, James gives us a pattern or an alternative to these things. He says, so the one earthly and unspiritual and demonic wisdom looks like this, but he gives us this alternative view, and he says, but wisdom that comes from heaven, wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure and peace-loving, it's considerate, it's submissive, it's full of mercy and good fruit, and it's impartial and sincere. Okay, so that's a big list, and I'm actually going to go through it one by one because I think it's really important, and our implications that I kind of saved to the end are all going to be woven through this part. But so let's have a first crack at it. The first one that we're going to look at is pure. So this type of wisdom has no defects. And we know this when we talk about purity. There's certain levels of purity that we see that have no defects. And purity is one of those things that is a mark of Christ. And so those of us who are, if Christ is pure, and if those of us who are Christ followers and are given new life, then our lives and action ought to look like His. And so we need to be pure in that same way. The psalmist writes in Psalm 12, verse 6, he says, and the words of the Lord are flawless, like silver purified in a crucible, like gold refined 7 times. And so this means that if we have this wisdom that is pure, that we don't then lie or try to deceive people. And that's a huge implication. If we have wisdom that comes from heaven, it's like we're not going to be deceitful. And so we're going to speak truth. We're going to speak truth in love. We're going to be caring about people. And the things that leave our mouth are going to be pure and without lying. And we have these lies of commission, of things like active lying. But then we have these other sneaky ones, those lies of omission, where you just don't tell the whole truth. But by not telling the whole truth, you then aren't being truthful. And if you can't be truthful, you can't be trusting. And if you can't be trusting, you can't have good relationships with people. And so if you have this kind of stuff marking your life is going to have you're going to have a faith that doesn't work, because so much of our faith needs to be born out of community. And so we need to have this trust and this love and this purity be the foundation of how we relate to each other. So we need to be pure in our conversations. The second thing that James writes about is that wisdom is peace-loving. There you go. Wisdom is peace-loving. So this is a wisdom that doesn't antagonize others. It doesn't cause fights. And I think this is really important because we can live in such a world where it's so easy to throw stones, and we don't have to be face-to-face with people in the same way. Social media and texts and emails and all this kind of digital communication, which is all, I think it's good ultimately, but can be used in these bad ways, that we can pick fights with people all the time. It's actually one of the reasons why I got rid of my Facebook account. I use it for like just a couple work-related things, but I couldn't stay a part of this caustic environment on Facebook where people just tore themselves and each other's apart. They started fights all the time, and this is going to ruin your relationships. In Proverbs, it says that it's to one's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. And then I love what the Apostle Paul writes in Timothy. He says this, he says, don't have anything to do with foolish and stupid arguments, because you know that they produce quarrels. Man, if we could stay out of quarrels, we would show how wise we are. There's actually someone that I follow on Twitter. Twitter is one of the areas where I indulge a little bit on my social media. And so every single day he posts this passage, 2 Timothy 2:23. Don't have anything to do with foolish or stupid arguments. Which is good for me, because I've gotten into foolish and stupid arguments, especially online, which just betray any kind of wisdom I might have. It's even to the point my girls will call me out on this. They'll see that I might have Twitter open in a browser window or something, and they'll say, "Dad, no fighting on Twitter." And it's kind of this joke. But I need that, because I need to be in a spot where my wisdom is peace-loving and not picking fights or quarrels with each other. And of course, Jesus has some things to say about people who make peace, and he calls them blessed. Blessed are the peacemakers. They're going to be called children of God. All right, the next thing that we see in this list of heavenly spiritual wisdom is that it's considerate. Wisdom is considerate, which means we care about how things are said. Wisdom cares not just that the right thing is said, but it cares about how things are said. I've told this lots to people, is that people will forget the things that you say. As a communicator, I have to put a ton of work into preparing messages and communicating, it's kind of disheartening knowing that most people are going to forget the things that I say. But they're always going to remember how I made them feel. People are going to forget the things that you say, but they're always going to remember how you make them feel. And so a wise person is considerate, and they are aware that wisdom means that we care about how things are said. Now, it doesn't mean that we're perfect and that we don't ever screw it up, but it means that we're trying continually and molding our lives to have an outcome that is considerate. We see in Galatians, the Apostle Paul, he says that we need to carry each other's burdens. That's a considerate way to do it. And by doing that, you're going to fulfill the law of Christ. The Apostle Paul writes to Titus, and he's talking about how to choose elders for a church. And he says this about them. Oh, one sec, sorry, I went there. He says, make sure that they slander no one. They're to be peaceable and considerate and always gentle towards people. This is the criteria for what it means to lead in the church, that we need to be considerate. It shows wisdom in this way. And this is just something we just all have to get better at. I need to get better at, if as a church we can get better at making sure people feel that they are loved, and not just that they're told that they're loved. That makes a huge difference. That's why we need to be aware of when we gather back in person and people are joining us in person or even joining us here online, that we are very aware of how things feel, because we want to be considerate of where people are at and being able to care about them enough to allow them to feel comfortable to continue to join us and hear more about Jesus. But let's keep on going. Next one. You're probably not going to like this one as much because it's kind of gotten a bad rap in society, and that is that wisdom is submissive. Oh, we don't like that word submit. That kind of grates against us a bit. But wisdom doesn't demand its way. If we want to be wise people, we need to be people who don't demand our own way. Now that's really hard because some of us really like being right. That we need to be in a spot where everything needs to be right, and if it's right, then we get our own way. But being right and being wise are very different things. And being submissive means that we don't demand our own way. It means that we're willing to lay our own preferences down for the sake of other people, that a wise person isn't defensive. A wise person doesn't always need to be right. In fact, needing to be right will damage your relationships. It'll show that you have an inability to listen and to empathize with others and to absorb any new information. And some of us have a harder time with this than others. And some of you need to be a bit more assertive, and some of you need to be a bit more submissive. And I think the more that we can submit to each other, the more that we end up looking like Jesus. Because Jesus had to do the same thing. We see in the Garden of Gethsemane, he's out praying, and he actually has to submit his will to the Father's will. He says, he went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it's not possible for this cup to be taken away," he knew that he was going to be crucified. He says, then okay, but may your will be done. He had to submit his will to the Father's will. And then the Apostle Paul writes that as believers, we need to do the same thing. He says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset of Jesus Christ, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself and became obedient or submissive to death, even death on a cross. Wisdom means that we learn to submit, that we don't demand our own ways. And in doing so, we'll be more like Christ. One of the final ones here, full of mercy and good fruit. Being a wise person means that you are full of mercy and good fruit. And this really means that we just don't tear each other down. Wisdom doesn't tear each other down. That we need to be people who are building each other up. We need to have mercy for each other. And not just mercy in terms of letting things slide, but then also not like pointing out people's faults. Because it's really easy to let things slide, and I'll be merciful, but I'm also going to remind you about that thing that you did, that you screwed up, and how imperfect you are, and that thing you shouldn't be embarrassed of. We need to be in a spot where we're merciful, and we're not tearing people down, and also we are building people back up. This is kind of what Jesus was talking about, where all the law hinges on loving God, and then he also says, love your neighbor as yourself. When he's asked, what are the 2 commandments? He says, no other greater commandment than this. And then in Proverbs, it says, love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on a fault separates close friends. Do you want to divide your relationships? Do you want to divide the unity of a church? It's refuse to give up that fault that someone committed. We need to, love will prosper when we can learn how to forgive and not dwell on it. And then the final thing here is that wisdom is impartial and sincere. This means that wisdom is free from prejudice and hypocrisy. So free from prejudice and hypocrisy. So this is different. We need to be aware, like a wise person doesn't highlight or point out or despise other people's differences than their own. So if you want to have prejudice, you can find someone who doesn't look like you, doesn't act like you, doesn't have the same ethnic background as you, doesn't come from the same family lineage of you. They look different, they speak different, whatever it might be. They practice, I don't know, their culture is different. And you can look at them and say that I'm going to highlight and point out all the things wrong with that culture. And it moves into a spot where it becomes those people. Someone who looks different from me becomes a those people. And so we can catch ourselves. If you want to be wise, you need to be someone who does not have prejudice or hypocrisy. So whenever you find yourself saying, those people just need to go get a job, that those people, I don't like it when those people bring their culture here. I don't like those people living on my street. Life was better before those people came around here. I don't want those people in my church. And whoever those people are, that's just prejudice, and it's anti-Christ, and it's anti-gospel, and we need to make sure that as believers, we have a wisdom that is not just looking out for people who are just like ourselves, but is actively caring for people who don't look like us. This has immediate implications for the things that we see in terms of truth and reconciliation with our First Nations neighbors, and also for any immigrant who comes in, and we're in a society where we just need to be in a spot where we aren't looking at those people as their own problems and us as being superior in some way. That's racist and prejudiced and wrong, and we can't have it. It also means that as a church, if we want to be wise people as a body of believers, that there isn't a those people who aren't welcome in our church. That's called hypocrisy. You see signs that say on churches, everyone welcome, and you know full well not everyone is welcome. There are certain people who, if they were wearing certain clothes, definitely would not be welcome, based on where they came from, or their language, or what they smelt like, or where they live, or who they're married to, or who they're not married to. Those people, whoever they are, aren't welcome. That's hypocrisy. And we all have some level of hypocrisy in our lives, hypocrisy is the gap between what we profess and how we act. What we profess and how we act. There's always going to be this gap, and this gap is hypocrisy, and we're always going to have it. But a wise person is trying to shrink that gap so that there is just less of it there, because they are working hard to be loving and caring and thinking of others and aligning their lives to be more in line with the things and truths that they profess. Apostle Paul writes in Romans on this. He says, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Oh, no. Religious folk don't like this, because we like that Jesus accepted us while we were actively rebelling and living in sin from Christ. And he came and he accepted us as we were. But then we don't want to show that same kind of acceptance to people who might be in a very similar spot, just a couple years behind us perhaps. Our acceptance of people needs to be in the same way that Christ accepted you. Now, the false narrative is that acceptance means that you fully condone their actions. But is that the acceptance that Christ offered you? No. In my own sin, Christ came and he accepted me and welcomed me without condoning all of the evil and sin that I had in my life. In fact, he accepted me long before any of that sin was gone from my life. And so we need to be people who are accepting of people whose lives are messy and different, and they're learning and kind of coming to Christ, and not demanding that they clean themselves up before they ever encounter Jesus. Because that's the way of Jesus. That's how we do that, because that's how Jesus accepted us. Peter says this, he says, show proper respect to everyone. Who? Everyone. Just the people like me? No, everyone. Love the family of believers, fear God, honor the emperor. We just need to close that gap between what we profess and what we believe, become less prejudiced and hypocritical. And if we do these things, James says that peacemakers who sow in peace will reap a harvest of righteousness. So wisdom then is something that we need to continue to seek out, that it needs to be different from the world, that it ought to be shaped differently from the world. And the more that we invest ourselves into this, the more wise we're going to become. And the alternate is that if we don't do this, you become foolish. And the Bible has tons of things to say about the fool. Let's go have a read through like the book of Proverbs, for example. So we need to be people who are seeking wisdom, shunning foolishness, and becoming more like Christ. And when we do that, we're going to create an environment and foster a faith that works. Well, we're going to take a little bit of a break from our James series for the next 4 weeks over the month of July, and we're going to be focusing on our 4 elements of our denomination. The fourfold gospel, where we talk about Jesus as our Savior, our sanctifier, healer, and coming King. I've partnered with 3 other Alliance pastors, and we're all taking one of the sermons, and we're going to be able to combine our different styles of teaching and views on things, and it's going to be great as we share and swap virtual pulpits with each other. I encourage you to tune into that, and also stay tuned into any news that's going to be happening in terms of our reopening plan and when things can come back to having live services with people in the building. And yes, our online presence will continue for the next little bit. Thank you for joining us today. Grace and peace, guys. We will see you back here next week.
Thanks for being with us today. Just a couple quick reminders. If you have a prayer request or you would like someone to pray for you or with you, you can reach out to the church, prayer@mordenalliance.ca. You can send an email and we would be happy to pray for you. Also, if you're looking for ways to give, you can find different options on the church website, mordenalliance.ca, or you can come to the church office during regular office hours and you can also donate that way. Thanks and have a great week.